Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with real estate expert Justin Moy. He has been in real estate as his career for his entire professional life. He started out selling single-family homes in the third most competitive market in the country. He was able to become a top producer within his second year at the largest firm in the area. Through that experience, he has realized that there was a difference between being rich and being wealthy. We get into all of this and so much more. Enjoy the interview.
Hey, thank you for taking a minute out for the show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to, I love talking, so love talking and meeting new people. So this is awesome.
Well, we're in a good boat right now then. So before we get into your life and what makes you who you are as a real estate expert, I want to know, the last 3 years, COVID, this pandemic we've lived through has worked on us in very particular ways. And I'm curious how you survived that time period and how it's changed the way that you live your life and conduct business now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So COVID's effects essentially on investors, maybe, how people invest in real estate and what we've done, how our businesses have changed, things like that.
Well, yeah, that could be a part of it, and then just kind of the way that you have been affected by it as a person and how you interact with the world now in a different way.
Yeah, so, COVID, I think, really had a major impact in our business. So what we do is primarily multifamily investments. And so it's apartment living. And when we saw COVID come in, nobody really knew what was going to happen, right? We didn't really... I think not a lot of people took it that seriously at first, and then people said, okay, well, everyone's going to start working from home for a little bit, and then that couple of days turned into a couple of weeks, turned into a couple of months, turned into, we're still feeling the effects of it a couple of years later now. And really for the real estate investing industry, in the multifamily space, it actually really helped a lot of people who were investors, and it even helped a lot of tenants. When we saw the effects of COVID, what actually happened was people were able to pay a lot more for their apartments, and they were getting a lot of money from the government, a lot of subsidies, a lot of stimulus checks, a lot of rental assistance programs came through. And unfortunately, what people are seeing now is they kind of flooded that market with all that cash. And now we have the opposite. We have an affordability crisis because prices kind of artificially rose because people had all this money to spend on housing. And now that money's gone, and now you read in all the headlines, there's this huge affordability crisis in terms of dwelling, which is true. So in the short term, it really helped a lot of people pay a lot of the bills that they had. It artificially increased prices, and now we're starting to see things sort of stabilize back down and really normalize. We're seeing rents start to decrease in a lot of areas, which I actually, even as an investor, I think that's a good thing. I think the tenants had a ton of pressure on them. Pricing was unsustainable. It was growing at an unsustainable rate. And so, now we're starting to see that normalize back down. And I think that's a good thing. For me personally, COVID, I think brought a lot of things into perspective. I think it made people really slow down and really consider, what do I want to do? It helped a lot of people branch out of their comfort zone because now they didn't need to go into an office. They had a little bit more freedom. They could move to different areas that they wanted. And we saw this big outward migration of people leaving the big city and possibly finding a better life a little bit further out because now they didn't have to be attached to a single location. So I think I was part of that boat where it really helped me realize, maybe I didn't need to stay in one place for long. I could travel around. I could move a little bit more with a little bit more flexibility and freedom. And of course, it was tragic that there were a lot of lives lost, but it also helped people realize, you don't have to prioritize work. You should prioritize your life, and I think that we're feeling those effects on even the labor markets now. So, it was a big blimp in our history. I think nobody could have predicted that we'd be going through a global pandemic, but we definitely learned a lot about our society and how we work along the way.
Man, that was so well said. And, the interesting thing, I remember when the pandemic was starting to rage and they would have, there was TV specials where everybody was like, yeah, go to your local restaurants, we'll get through this, everything's going to be okay. And I kept thinking in the back of my mind, with the world grinding to a halt, there's going to be a back end to this. And the part of the back end is the first part of your answer, where it's like, okay, we're going to make it, everybody's optimistic and this, that, and the other, but eventually everything was going to catch up. Just the way the economy works in a cyclical manner, we're all going to have to start paying. Because all of these inflationary things that are happening right now is because whether we like it or not, we're going to have to support these restaurants and all of these other areas of the economy because they took such a hit. Even though they got government assistance, this is still the net that all of the people that didn't make money for a while or money where they wanted to are now making it.
Yeah, and that's what happens when really over the past 3 years, I forgot what the number is. I think it's like 61% of all the money we've ever printed happened in the last couple of years. And so we're feeling that sting with the inflation now because that's just what happens when you flood the economy with so much cash. And a lot of people criticize the government for doing that. And, I understand why they do that. But the other end of that would have been if they didn't stimulate enough, if they undershot it. I think they did overshoot it a little bit, but back then they didn't know that. If they would have undershot it, we would have had a lot more larger economic failures. We would have had a lot of industries, big private employers be in financial trouble. And so it's, hindsight's always 20/20. I think the Fed did the best they could back then. And I think they knew they would rather overshoot it than undershoot it.
Yeah, these are the moments where I miss Alan Greenspan. He was always kind of the Swami that knew how to mitigate all of these things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. But it hindsight's 20/20. I think everybody likes to criticize the decisions that the government makes. They overshot it a bit, and we knew we'd have to pay the price for all that cash, and here we are.
So let's get to the essence of exactly what you do on a daily basis for a living. If you were to be put in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders at a career day, and one of the kids asks you, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer that?
I would tell them probably my elevator pitch. I would say, I help people invest passively in commercial real estate, and that's what I do. There's different types of investments. There's really the public investments and the private investments. Public is going to be the stock markets, and the privates are going to be almost anything else. And so I think when you look at investment strategies, so many people are taught to go conventional, to go public. Oh, these are the indexes. If you invest in these for 40 years, you'll average 8%, and you'll have $1 million by the time you're 80 years old. And I think that process is so flawed. I think that process is so flawed because, first of all, you're relying on something that you don't control. It's the public markets. Returns in the public markets have been extremely unstable since the 90s. Since the 2000s and on, if you look at the average 10-year rolling returns of the public markets, they're cut in half than what they were in the 80s and the 90s. It's extremely volatile, and you don't have the enormous benefits that you used to with them. Specifically with taxes, a lot of private investments now have much more favorable tax incentives. And really, if you look at why the public markets are the, quote unquote, standard or the conventional way of investing, it's because America really needed investors to stimulate the public markets after World War II. And since then, I don't think it's become a primary driver of personal growth. It's good for the country, but it's the government wants you to invest in private items now, which is why they've shifted a lot of their tax incentives to private investments, specifically things like food, energy, and real estate. And so we're seeing vastly superior returns, superior tax benefits, and you're actually able to live a more fulfilling life because you don't need to stash your money away for 20, 30, 40 years to realize return.
So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I think when I was in the third grade, my dream was probably pretty similar to what most third grade boys wanted. I wanted to be, police officer. I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be in the Army. I wanted to do all those things that you saw in the movies. And I actually did fulfill one of those. I ended up going into the Marines when I was 18. So that sort of stuck with me a little bit. But after that, I realized those weren't lives that I wanted to pursue. I got out after my first term and dove into real estate as a profession. So yeah, I think it was pretty similar story. Race car driver maybe was for a little bit there. But I actually fulfilled some of that. I went to the Marines when I graduated high school and was able to live a little bit of that experience.
That question, I'm always amazed that no matter what happens and whoever it is, it always begins with a laugh. Everybody can just go back to that safe place in childhood, and it's wonderful.
yeah, and then I wonder how those answers will change nowadays, or for the next generation, because for guys like us, maybe those jobs that were admired and really looked up to, now maybe they're not. So I'm curious how that answer kind of evolves as the years go on and the generations go on.
That's such a great insight right there, because it's totally true. Like, I even think about all of the younger generation right now. I have 2 teenagers at home, and I interview a lot of what you would call the Gen Zs, and a lot of the youth are opening up their own businesses and doing their own thing. They're not just like, all right, we're going to go and find a job at a company that makes good money. It's like, I think COVID maybe woke, like you were saying earlier on a little bit about how our mindsets changed, and I think the youth realizes that their life is much more valuable than this notion of what business will do to make them who they are. They're going to make themselves, and business will be by proxy.
Yeah, and I think in a way they're forced to. In a way they're forced to, right? So 30 years ago, back in 1993, if you made $50,000 a year, that's the equivalent of now making $104,000. Money's been cut in half. So, jobs out of college are not offering, anywhere close to that amount. So I think they're kind of doing the math, and they're saying, man, if I really want to have a chance, I can't rely on this job that pays me, 60, 70 grand a year, because I can't really afford to live anywhere and make that. So I think they're realizing that too, where their hand is almost forced. So yes, they're valuing their life balance a lot more than previous generations, but also they're feeling the squeeze of, hey, if I want to make it, I want to live the life that I really want to have, I can't scrape by at a corporate job. It just doesn't pay what it used to.
That's interesting. That's totally true. Yeah. There's many layers to that. Let's get into your motivations in the beginnings of your life. Tell me where you were born and raised and how these seeds were planted in you to become interested in real estate and business.
Yeah, so I was born in what's called the East Bay area in California. So it's just over the San Francisco Bridge to the east. And really, I had 2 phenomenal parents who ended up splitting up, and because of that, I inherited 2 more phenomenal step-parents. And my biggest form of privilege was that I had that family that really loved me and supported me. And so that really opened my eyes as to what was possible. They always encouraged me to think of more. Like, what more can you do? My father's an entrepreneur. He owns a restaurant. He moved to America from Hong Kong, didn't speak English, and he is, successful in the restaurant business. Has owned that restaurant for, about 40 years now. And so he had always really taught me, if you can always bet on yourself. Yes, it's great to go get a job. Yes, it's great to get experience. But at the end of the day, if you are forced to be successful, if you're putting your back against the wall, chances are you're going to find a way you're going to be able to make it happen. So really taking those lessons, I wanted to see what were some ways that I could, again, this is coming right out of high school, right out of the Marines, what are some ways that I can just make more of myself? Because I was seeing exactly what I just said this younger generation is seeing. I didn't want to work that corporate job. I didn't want to barely scrape by. I didn't want to sell 40, 50 hours a week of my life to some company. So I got into real estate sales. And that's what really, really sprung this big interest in being an investor, because in real estate sales, I was very transactionally rich, but I was locationally specific. I had to stay in one spot, and I was transactional. So I was constantly on the hamster wheel. I needed to chase the next check. I needed to chase the next commission. It took a toll on my personal life, my relationships, my health, and my exchange was a lot of monetary success, but I knew I needed to change that out. So that's what led me to becoming an investor, becoming an owner, and helping other people invest passively in assets so that they didn't have to sacrifice that time as well. So that's really the backstory, how I ended up, I've been really in real estate my whole professional life. And it's an industry that I absolutely love, and it's so big, and there's so many ways to get into real estate that I think, if more people understood this field, there'd be a lot more people who participated in it in some way.
The thing about me, I've got a couple houses in my life up to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and I always have had a wonderful relationship, and still to this day keep up with those people. It's just such a strong
Mm-hmm.
bond, such a strong bond for what we consider business.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a people business. It's a relationship business. Throughout my years, I've learned to love to build relationships. I've learned to love to meet people like you in any walk of life, in any form of life. And I think that's something that gives me a lot of fulfillment in this field too. Is on any given week, I'm probably meeting at least 10 to 20 to maybe 30 just new people, and some of them are really great. Some of them are, they come and go, but just getting to see all different people from all walks of life, where they're at in their journey, and how I can help them get to the next level if that's possible. That's something that I think is really, really awesome about the job too.
So, if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who would it be?
Oh man, anybody alive on the planet right now? Who I really, really respect is, I think Andrew Yang, if you know who he is. Have you heard of him?
Uh-huh. Yeah, he was the presidential candidate.
He was a candidate, yeah. And I know he didn't stand a chance because he wasn't really into the big two that we have. But every time I heard him talk, I think he was really, really, really smart. I think he was extremely intelligent. I think he has such a pretty good forward vision of the issues that this country has. And politics aside, I think there was a certain humanity to him that I could really resonate with. He had a really, really solid grasp, I think, on, hey, what are some of the future challenges that we're facing, specifically with technology and automation. And actually, I read an article earlier this week that Walmart is set to automate about 55% of their labor force. Walmart's the biggest private employer in the country. So I think, these issues are going to become more prevalent. And I'm just curious to pick his brain and say, hey, what is that next step in our societal evolution? Because I don't think that next step is to stop technological advances, but we have to understand that technological advances will remove a lot of the current way that we operate society and the jobs we have. So what does that next step look like? I think that's a topic that's going to be a really, really hot topic over the next 10 years.
So for you, every day you wake up, we have things we want to do and accomplish. There's motivators that get us out of bed and get us through a day. What is the ultimate motivator for you to accomplish and get done what you want to do with your life?
So in my role right now, the reason why I absolutely love it is I help a lot of people invest in real estate for a lot of times the first time. And that sense of satisfaction, I love to educate people. I love to teach. I love to coach. I love to mentor. So in this field, within real estate investing, when I tend to be, just because I've been in the field for my whole professional life, a lot of people don't have the knowledge that I have. So when I get to share that knowledge with people, when I get to have those conversations, when I get to, whether they end up investing or not, or they just kind of take the knowledge and go, or maybe they do something else, I love feeling like I educated somebody today, feeling like I helped you, feeling like if we have a conversation, you're going to leave that conversation with some kind of value, whether you learn something, you entertain, something. So I love the feeling of spreading awareness and teaching and coaching. So that's really a big driver for me. I love having those conversations. I love talking to people and educating people. It just so happens to be mostly about real estate, but if there's anything in the field that I love to do, it's helping people learn new things. So that's a huge, huge, huge motivator for me.
So in that pursuit of helping people, it's not just purely business. It's a relationship with the person. What's been the best success story that you've ever been a part of?
Yeah, I mean, helping my mother retire. That's been a huge one. That's a personal one because, my mother, she retired recently, and she was very conventional, very old school with her retirements. All her money was in 401ks and IRAs and the stock market. So over the last couple of years, her portfolio has been hit, 20-25%. And she was coming to the realization that, her goal was to retire. She actually retired last Friday. And she initially thought, this was a couple of years ago, okay, I won't be able to make that because my portfolio has taken such a big hit. And so I was able to put her in a few private investments. They performed very, very, very well. and it gave her the confidence to actually retire last Friday and stick to her original plan. So I think that was a huge, personal win for me and the family. My mother has been retired for 6 days now. Instead of saying, hey, I maybe have to stick this out for another couple of years till the market rebounds. So that was, and that's a recent one. That was just a huge win for me. Just her being able to actually stick to that original plan. She's earned her retirement. I didn't want her to push it off, and really help her out.
So of all of the things that you've done and accomplished up to this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I'm the proudest of, let's go back into my initial real estate career within sales. And this was going to be one of probably the biggest moments in my professional, but also leaked into my personal life. So in real estate sales, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a 100% commission job. You don't sell, you don't make money, you don't eat. And I was in an extraordinarily competitive market. At the time, it was the third most competitive market in the country. It was like New York, LA, and then the East Bay. And then the East Bay and the San Francisco Bay Area would kind of go back and forth. And we would fight tooth and nail for listings. And what I would do is I would cold call all day, every day. So I was a phone solicitor. I was one of those people. I would just make a ton of phone calls every day. And fast forward 6 months from when I started the job, I was cold calling every day, anywhere from 2 to 8 hours a day. And I just had nothing. I mean, Joe, I had made $0. No good leads, no list, no anything to look forward to. And I was alone in the office. It was about 7 at night. I was sitting there in my suit. I don't know why I got dressed up in a suit. I mean, I was calling people. They didn't see me. And I just took my headset off and I just said, I'm done. This is ridiculous. So I told myself I was going to quit. I was going to leave the office. I was just never going to come back. And I was already thinking of what I would tell my friends and family, because I told everybody, right, hey, I'm in real estate now. This is my career. And I was so embarrassed. I was just thinking, okay, what's the excuse can I make that's was it the office that wasn't good? Was it the market that's like, what was I going to tell them? And as I'm thinking of these excuses, one more notification dings on my laptop, and it was another kind of listing that came up. It was a for sale by owner property. And I just sat there and I stared at that listing, and it was on Craigslist, probably for a minute or minute and a half straight. And I just said, okay, forget it. One more call and I'll never do this again. I ended up calling that lady. She told me yes, actually. She was the only person that had ever told me yes up to that point on a cold call. I went the next morning to her home, listed her home. She sold her home with me, bought her next home with me, and it ended up being a $60,000 net commission to me, all with one customer. And so to me, that was the biggest, proudest moment of my life, because it showed me that the process works. It showed me that life and business have this really interesting way of pushing you to your absolute limits before giving you that break. And it just taught me to always be focused on the process. Don't focus on the result. Focus on the process, and the results will come.
So everybody has you cast in a certain light, your family, friends, clients, colleagues, but ultimately you live your life. You're in control of it. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, I think, that the answer to that question changes probably every year, right? As we continue to learn and as we continue to grow. So, who am I? I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I've always been somebody who has been willing to bet on myself and the people who I know, like, and trust. I'm very loyal to the people that are in my inner circle, and I respect people who are loyal to theirs. And I'm just a person I do my best to learn every single day. Every day I commit some time to reading, to learning new languages, to learning about different people or different perspectives. So, I think that answer changes a lot, and I think it should change a lot for people as they continue to grow. But overall, I'm very growth-oriented, and that's really what I value. I think at the end of the day, you'll never regret investing more in yourself and investing more into the people who are in your circle and in your network. So, I don't know if that's a solid answer with a direct answer, but I think that the answer of who you are should change pretty frequently as you continue to grow, and I'm just continuing that process.
That was a very jazz answer right there. That was an evolved, wise, answer. It's totally true, though. I concur quite enthusiastically. So, Justin, if anyone out there is interested in hiring you, learning more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where do they go?
Yeah, so, the best place is probably going to be, we have a website set up for all these things. It's real estate specific, so if you want to learn about real estate, there'll be a ton of info there. If not, my info will also be there as well. You can go to thedefinitive.guidebook.com, and it's an ebook. It's called The Definitive Guide to Passive Real Estate Strategies. They can check that out. Even if you're not interested in that, you'll have my information will be there. It'll get sent your way. And so you can always connect with me. Like I said, I love talking to people, love learning about different people, so always happy to connect.
Man, what an enlightening, engaging conversation. Thank you for throwing your wisdom and your story out there. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you, Joe. This was a fantastic experience. I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.